Thank you very much for joining us, and a very warm welcome to you. You're watching Encounter. Today, we have an international consultant and a specialist in emotional well-being, none other than Dr. Basser Jeewoody. He also holds an undergrad in psychology. He has a master's in education and a PhD in mental health. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us in the studio of MBC. Please tell us a bit more about emotional well-being and how important it is.
First of all, I really appreciate your time and I really sincerely thank MBC for giving me this opportunity to talk about a very, very important topic, which is emotional well-being, and that is of a concern for everybody. Doesn't matter where you are, whether you are in Mauritius, whether you are overseas, whether you are living in the bush, and so on and so forth. I mean, emotion, when you look at the term emotion, we have anger, that's an emotion. We have sadness, we have happiness, we have disappointment, we have frustration, and we are grieving, okay, we are forgetful, we are confused, and so on and so forth. So when you actually look at all of those factors, they will fall under the umbrella of emotional issues. But when we talk about emotional well-being, that's the positive side of emotion. But we have also got the negative side of emotion. If a person is not feeling well emotionally, then there would be implication from that. We talk about psychological implication. It may lead to emotion like anxiety, depression. If the person is not emotionally well, that can lead to very negative behavior. Like in our society, we have abuse, we have violence, we have emotional abuse, we have domestic violence, we have stealing, we have substance abuse, for example, drug and so on and so forth. If a person is emotionally well balanced, then the life of that particular person or the group of person will be in a very balanced way.
So, Doctor, we are all affected by emotions, and the way we feel our emotions, we often project it a bit on ourselves, but also on other people and people in our direct circle, and also at work, where we study. Why is it so important to well manage our emotions?
I think at the beginning of your statement, you made a very good observation. We project our emotion outside in the form of aggression, abuse, and so on and so forth. But we also keep those emotions within, intrinsically, inside. And that's not a very good news, really. So when you keep your emotion inside, you're not able to dispense those sadness or badness and so on, then you bottle up. Exactly, you bottle up. There's an empty bottle, you keep putting things inside the bottle will take whatever you put in up to a certain extent. Eventually, the bottle will smash. So we talk about having a crisis. So if you bottle up within yourself, then there's a fair chance that you will be experiencing a crisis moment.
And it happens to everyone.
It happens to everyone. Potentially, it can happen to everyone. Some people are not very good at managing those emotions, controlling it, dealing with them and so on. Some people have got what we call the inner force, intrinsic strength. We talk about resilience. So if you're a person of resilience, you've got that inner force, the ability to perceive what's forthcoming and doing about that, then you'll be able to minimize the bad emotion, okay? But those people who are not able to, they will bottle up, and eventually that can lead to a crisis situation, depression, and so on and so forth.
How important is stress in filling up that bottle you just mentioned?
Well, stress, small stress is good.
It's an engine.
It's an engine, yeah, it's an engine. We have to have a stress. If you have a small controllable stress, it keeps you alert. We talk about, preparedness. It's something to do with hormones. So if you are stressed out a little bit, we have got hormones produced by the body, for example, the adrenaline by the adrenal gland. So that actually prepares you to deal with those stress. So adrenaline will make you breathe faster, your heart rate will go faster, your muscle will be all ready, so you are energized. You're energized to deal with that. So we do need to have a little bit of a stress. However, if you are stressed out all the time and you are producing a large amount of adrenaline, that means you are also producing other ingredients in your body, for example, hydrochloric acid in your stomach, and you may end up with gastric ulcers or ulcerative colitis. In that case, there's a term used, the medical jargon if you like, is called psychosomatic. Psycho is psychological, stress is a psychological phenomenon, and if you are not controlling that effectively, it can lead to some physical disorder, physical symptoms like ulcerative colitis and so on and so forth. So we end up with a term called psychosomatic. So it's very important that we are in control. We don't continuously experience stress. We need to learn to manage it, minimize those side effects, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So how do you make sure that this bottle you mentioned, how do we make sure that it's not filled up? How do we download it? How do we get rid of those emotions that could possibly be good or better, but possibly we would want to get rid of the negative ones? Any advice on this?
Yes, like I said earlier on, some people are more prone to experiencing stress. It very much depends on the characteristics, the personality of the person. Personality is congruent with experiencing stress, okay? We talk about theory X, theory Y sort of personality, so we need to be aware of that. If you are the type of person who is going to be more prone to stress, then you need to be aware of that, okay? You need to be aware of that. I use terms like reflection in action, reflection on action. So for example, we are in action now. You're talking with me, I'm talking with you, we are in action. I'm sure you are reflecting on what you're saying and you're reflecting on your own voice. I'm doing the same thing. So we are reviewing it on an ongoing basis. If we didn't review it, if we didn't reflect on that, then we might be saying different things all over the place, okay? Reflection on action is something which has taken place. After the end of this session, you might reflect on this. Oh, how did I do? I would do the same thing. How did I do? So if I stressed out yesterday because there was a circumstance, I think it's very important for me to reflect on that. What happened? Why did I get stressful? What should I have done to manage that? So if I'm faced with a similar experience next time, I will be better informed about managing it. So reflection on action, reflection in action is very, very important. Otherwise, you might end up saying anything and anything which comes to your mind, which can be detrimental to you and the person you're dealing with.
Every time we've achieved or completed a series of things or actions, I'm going to keep it very open.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, you will tend to reflect on what you've done.
Yes.
But the fact that you're always doing this, doesn't it even cause the body or the person more stress because you're always pushing yourself to improve?
Yeah, it has to be done in a in a very subtle way. You know, you don't have to force yourself to be reflecting on it. It has to be done in a natural way, okay? Otherwise, what will happen is you become too conscious. You become over-conscious. You know, a lot of people are over-conscious. What I'm going to say, what's going to be the reaction? So if you're over-conscious, it's really going to be creating more stress for you anyway. So we have to do things in a very natural way, okay? That's a training in itself, okay? Most people are very good at it. Most people are very, very good at it. And you would know when you're talking to somebody, you can say, I have had the most pleasant conversation I have had. I felt good, we felt connected. You know, it was a win-win situation. But sometimes when you talk with somebody, oh, goodness me, that was terrible. I don't want to see that person again, because it became like a toxic environment. So it's going to create more...
You feel drained at the end.
You feel drained. we talk about physical drain, physical energy, but we also talk about psychological energy.
You're drained physically and mentally, and you
Of
want
course.
just to stay away from
course.
the whole situation.
So therefore, when you reflect on what has happened, that situation drained you, that person drained you, that person could have been like a toxic person. So would you like to go and see him again? Would you like to invite him to have a coffee with you? I wouldn't. I may, but if I do that, I might have, I would approach the whole situation differently. So when people don't connect, it can be stressful.
I'm going to ask you on the importance of parents in the upbringing of their children, and especially how should they cater for the emotional well-being of their children, and how important it is, because I believe these children are the future of the country, and it is very important to have your emotional well-being in check.
Mm-hmm.
So do you believe that parents in Mauritius are doing a good job?
Of course, they are all parents. They are parents because they are committed to their family. No parents will be harmful to their children unless they are suffering themselves from some upheaval, some distress, some factors. So it becomes a bit difficult because of circumstances. Circumstances are created by society, all right? So if you are in a very, in a circumstance whereby you don't have a job, you've got 2 children, you have to have money to cater for your kids, okay? How can you do that effectively? Because you're so preoccupied with earning and your own, what we call self-esteem. Self-concept. Self-concept is how you see yourself. If you're unemployed, you see yourself to be not a useful person in society. Society will look down upon you, okay? So therefore it affects your self-esteem, how you feel. Now, if your feeling is not positive, if you don't look at yourself as a positive person, so you take it on the person who is closest to you. And if the children are there, they can copy it, okay? So we need to bear that in mind, circumstantial about our society. Then we also have what we call critical stage of development. Critical stage of development. From the time you are born, we have critical stages. And we need to have the right sort of emotional support, physical support, social support during each critical phase of development of a child. Now, if they don't receive those sort of support, so to say, they miss the boat. And you will see the effect or the ill effect of those when they're growing up. And most of the ill effects tend to happen during adolescent phase. So when you look at substance abuse, when you look at stress factors, it could be a build-up from what has happened in the past. So going back to your question, what's the responsibility of the parents? We need to be very much aware of making sure that during each critical stage of development, that emotional support is given from a preventative perspective. Whereas if the adolescents are experiencing difficulties, then we tend to react to them, tend to redress the balance, so it becomes more of a reactive type of strategy. From an earlier stage, we need to be in a position of proactiveness. We need to foresee what might be coming and help them.
Exactly. So can you share with us any tips at the early age and eventually during the teen years of how parents, I wouldn't say should react, but probably should behave?
Yeah, good. I very strongly believe in what we call positive reinforcement, meaning you compliment the child, you reward the child, you praise the child, you acknowledge when the child is doing something good, but not only reprimanding them when they do something bad. So negative reinforcement is short-lived, is very short-lived. They will start behaving well, but for a only short period.
So you need a balance between negative reinforcement and also encouraging the child.
Of course, my first approach would be a positive reinforcement. You have the negativeness, so instead of concentrating on what the child has not done, concentrate on what the child is good at, and has done properly, okay? So you reinforce that, and the child feels good, and then gradually say, by the way, that works better, okay? But if you keep reprimanding the child, negatively reinforcing, that will stay. And obviously, behavior will change at all.
anything you could share with us, especially to parents watching?
Sure. The teenage era is a very pressured era. Okay, they're not just growing physically, emotionally, socially. They got pressure to finish their schooling. They got pressure to think ahead. What are they going to do? What sort of work they'll be doing? Whether they are able to compete as well as their peers. So there's a peer pressure, parental expectation, and also financial expectation, maybe leaving home, living separately and so on. So cumulatively, there's a lot of pressure amongst the teenagers, okay? So, so they reach a stage when they cannot cope.
I believe that the emotional well-being plays a huge role. And in this era, how much is technology affecting our emotional well-being?
It's affecting all the time, and it's getting worse. So much so that there is a syndrome emerging. Syndrome, you know, like a mental illness, it's a syndrome. Physical illness is a syndrome. There's a syndrome emerging. And the syndrome is very much connected to the artificial intelligence, you know, computerization, the Facebook, the other social interaction we have, the telephone. And the latest discovery is children are becoming withdrawn. Withdrawal symptoms. If they don't get a message on the Facebook, in the middle of the night they will wake up, 2 o'clock in the morning they will wake up, they will check the phone to see if the message is coming through or not. That sort of dependency is being developed.
But what causes that validation for them from social networks?
Well, it's a reinforcement there again. You know, when you are talking with your peers, with your friends, you talk about sharing information, pleasant things, what have you done, what parties have you gone to, and so on and so forth. It's a form of communication, and it's a form of building up that rapport, you know, that seeking of the positive reinforcement. Now, if a friend doesn't respond to you, you feel left out.
Going forward, what are your plans in terms of emotional well-being, especially for Mauritius?
When I look at cumulatively, we live in a fairly troubled world. We live in a very troubled world. We are trying to help our troubled world by establishing, for example, the non-government departments, you know, organizations. We have got special courses, we have got training for professionals and so on and so forth. But my understanding is if you have those training, those support systems, those NGOs, emotional well-being should be better, but it's still lagging behind. Those services are improving, enhancing. We are getting more and more of that, but emotional well-being of the individuals and the nations and groups and so on, still lagging behind. And hence we have got all those upheavals in our society: sexual abuse, emotional abuse, domestic violence, stealing, imprisonment, and so on and so forth, okay? So therefore my big question is, why isn't it happening? And I've come to an answer, and the answer is that we lack synergy. We lack synergy. Each individual group, each individual person, they're doing their own thing separately, but we don't tend to talk to each other. We don't to share information. We don't share the impact and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to create as a synergy like that. The glue. We need to have a glue with all the organizations which are concerned with, you know, addressing emotional well-being. And I have come up to the idea that when you look at Mauritius, for example, we've got quite a large number of institutes and organizations, from the universities to community organizations and so on. They could be working together to meet the needs, you know.
You want to bring together all the NGOs, bring together all the action, create a certain synergy in
It's
the
a
country.
synergy.
How do you propose going forward with that?
The synergy will be through the establishment of a consortium.
Please, would you mind sharing this with us?
A consortium is a number of organizations working together. For example, my proposed consortium is such that we have, say, the Open University, we have the University of Mauritius, we have the Mauritius Research Council and so on. Each of those entities will have a very specific role to play, okay? And I'm also negotiating to work together with the Indian Ocean Rim Association so that we have a broader consortium. I've already spoken with organizations like Singapore and so on and so forth. So when we work together, there is that strength. We work together, we share information, we develop best practice model, and we are really engaged to make a difference. So far, I've spoken with quite a few organizations, and I'm getting nothing but very positive comments made. And the other area as part of this consortium is to develop a center for accident minimization. I'm very concerned about accidents here in Mauritius, and we tend to look at the reasons for accidents being the road condition, the weather condition, the condition of the vehicles and so on, but we are failing to look at the human factors which are responsible for accidents. And my research, my observation, literature will demonstrate that between 95 to 96% of accidents which happen are very much to do with the human factors. The coordination, the reaction time, the aggressiveness, mental fatigue, okay? So, and there are tools to evaluate that. I was a consultant for an international company for 4.5 years, and we implemented what we call the psychometric testing to find out who is going to be an accident risk. And we prevented accident by 97%. So therefore, if 97% of accidents reduced, that organization became like a club. All the drivers there passed the test. They worked like a club, so productivity was effective, and they got a lot of business from outside. Okay, there's also going to be a center for successful aging. We live in an aging society, and we do have concern about aging, our aging society, and also looking at families. We gradually minimizing that extended family concept. So therefore, there's a bit of a concern from that perspective. The other thing I would like to say is we need to create champions. We need to create champions to really surge emotional well-being ahead. And the way to create the champion is by qualifying individuals in the field of emotional well-being. So I've proposed, I've already developed a doctor in emotional well-being. I have got about 18 to 20 individuals who are already interested to enroll. So when you have, like we were talking earlier on, you may be interested in an emotional well-being doctorate program. So your doctorate program will be, say for example, looking at media. What media, how media can contribute or is contribute to enhance emotional well-being. You can research that, develop best practice model. I've got individuals coming from banking system. When you look at the banking system, there's a lot of emotional well-being issues there. You know, bank give money left, right, and center, and individuals are struggling to pay back. So therefore, there's a bit of an upheaval. I've got accountants. I've even got medical officers. I've got 2 medical officers who have expressed interest to do some research. One area is what we call psychosocial needs. My research will demonstrate that 2/3 of individual patients in a hospital, 2/3 of their needs are very much psychosocial needs. Yet we are tending to implement a more or less, that's changing though, a more or less a medical model. So we are not addressing the emotional well-being of individual clients as such. So therefore they don't get better. Most people do get better, some of them don't. So we have created what we call a revolving door sort of syndrome. They get better, they go home, but they come back. So the program, it's not a project, it's a program, will address all those factors. Cultural issues, ethical issues, philosophical issues. You know, we have culture of professional practice and a culture of ethnicity. We need to look at that as well, okay? So it's a fairly interesting program, well-researched, and one thing I would like to also say, it's a very unique program. We don't have such a program in any part of the world. We do have center of excellence, departments, courses in the area of emotional well-being, but not an entity which will bring large number of organization and the community organization to work together to make a difference. And I think for Mauritius and the region, that's the way to go. If there is an opportunity to implement this particular program, there will be a lot of difference made. And my motto is the happiness, the motto. It's really promoting happiness within yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for being here with us in the studio of the MBC. Thank you very much for your time. We have now come to the end of this episode of Encounter. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week for another episode.